I'll never forget the morning my daughter, my only daughter, told me she was getting married without me. She did it with a coldness I didn't know she had, with that same voice that used to ask me for help buttoning up her school dress, but was now trembling with nothing but pride and contempt. "I don't need some washed-up old man giving me away," she told me, not even blinking as she picked up her purse. That sentence hit me like a slow-moving bullet. Every word felt heavier than all the years I'd been living alone, heavier than all the nights I'd spent staring at her picture, just hoping she'd one day call me Dad with love again. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. If I had opened my mouth, the pain would have come out as a scream, and I didn't want her last memory of me to be a man begging for love. She closed the door, and the echo of that slam bounced off the empty walls of my house, sealing my fate. In the silence that followed, I heard the tick-tock of the dining room clock, the same one I bought for her 15th birthday. That clock had ticked off every minute of her childhood, her teenage years, of all the times I waited up for her to get home from parties. Now, it was just ticking off the minutes of my defeat. I lit a cigarette, even though I barely smoke anymore, and just stared out the window. The sky was such a deep, heavy gray, it seemed to understand my mood. I thought about my late wife, Claire, and I wondered if, wherever she was, she could see what had happened to our daughter. "Claire, if you could only see what our little girl's become," I mumbled, and I felt something inside me break for good. But before we continue, I wanted to ask if you've subscribed to the channel and liked the video. It helps me see that you're supporting me and enjoying my stories. Okay, let's get back to it. We weren't always like this. There was a time when Ashley was my reason for getting up in the morning. I remember when she was just 6, she'd climb up on my shoulders to reach the apples on the tree in our backyard. She called me my hero, and her laughter was the music that filled the house. Later, when Claire got sick, she was the one who helped me take care of her. She used to tell me that when she grew up, she was going to marry someone just like me. But time, hardship, and the words of other people slowly pushed her away. It all started when she met Daniel, a polished young man with an easy smile and an ambitious look in his eye. She met him at work, and from that moment on, my daughter began to change. She stopped coming over for Sunday dinner. She stopped calling me at night to tell me about her day. And when I did see her, she was always in a hurry, like she was ashamed if anyone saw us together. I remember one afternoon I stopped by her apartment without calling first. She opened the door and tensed up the second she saw me. "Dad, you didn't tell me you were coming," she said, flustered, just as Daniel appeared behind her with a polite but distant smile. "I just wanted to say hello, honey." Daniel offered his hand, but there was something in the gesture that chilled my blood, a mix of superiority and pity. "A pleasure, Mr. Baker. Ashley's told me so much about you," he said, but it didn't sound like a compliment. In that moment, I understood. That man didn't see me as the father of the woman he loved. He saw me as an insignificant obstacle. That was the first time I truly felt like I was losing everything. Little by little, Ashley started speaking to me with impatience, as if my every word was an annoyance. When I asked her if she was sure about getting married, she took offense. "Dad, you don't understand anything. Daniel makes me feel important. With you, everything was always sadness, sickness, and debt. I want a new life." I didn't answer her. I just looked at her and saw something in her eyes I didn't recognize. She was ashamed of me. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at a picture of us at the park taken when she was 10. I was holding her in my arms, and we were both laughing. How do you go from that love to this humiliation so fast? I thought about writing her a letter, but my hands were shaking with anger. I didn't know if I wanted to ask for her forgiveness or make her understand how much she had hurt me. The next day, I heard from a neighbor that the wedding was on Saturday. "They say it's going to be at St. Michael's Church, with over 200 guests," she said, having no idea what that news meant to me. I stayed quiet, but inside, something lit up, a mixture of sadness and dignity I'd never felt before. If my daughter wanted to erase my existence, she could at least do it knowing who I really was. Not the washed-up old man she spoke of, but the man who raised her with love, who defended her from everyone, even from herself. That night, I sat down at my desk, pulled out an envelope and a pen, and wrote on the front, "For the priest officiating the wedding of Ashley Baker." I still didn't know what I would put inside, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let the story end like this, with my name wiped from her life. I lit a candle, like I used to do when my wife was still alive, and I asked her to guide me. Claire always said that true love doesn't give up, but also that a father shouldn't stay silent in the face of injustice. And though I didn't know yet what truth I would reveal, I felt like life was pushing me to do it. That morning, as the clock struck 3, I began to write. It wasn't a letter of spite, but of justice. A letter she would never forget. A letter that would be read at the exact moment she said, "I do." And with that certainty, I blew out the candle and smiled for the first time in a long, long time. We weren't always enemies. There was a time when Ashley was the reason I felt invincible. I remember when she was born, I was just 30 years old with a heart full of dreams. Claire, my wife, cried when she saw her for the first time, and we swore she would never want for anything. We were poor, yes, but we were happy. I worked in a wood shop, and every night I'd come home with my hands full of splinters and my soul full of pride, because I knew I was doing it for them. Ashley was a curious, restless kid with a smart-as-a-whip intelligence that amazed me. She loved to watch me carve the wood. Sometimes she'd sit on my lap and say, "Daddy, how do you make a piece of log turn into something so beautiful?" With patience, I'd always tell her, wood is a lot like people. If you treat it with love, it reveals what it has inside. She would laugh, and every time she did, I felt like the world stopped for just a second. When she turned 8, I built her a small dollhouse. It was simple, but I painted it in the colors she picked, pink, white, and sky blue. She spent hours in there, making up stories, and every afternoon she'd come running out to hug me when she saw me coming home. "My dad, the best carpenter in the world," she'd yell through the neighborhood. And I, a man of few words, felt like the king of the universe. But fate doesn't allow for endless happiness. Claire got sick when Ashley was 12. First, it was the fainting spells, then the diagnoses, the medicines, the hospitals. I sold my most valuable tools to pay for the treatments. And all the while, my daughter watched the strongest woman she knew slowly fade away. Sometimes I'd find her crying silently, hiding behind a door. "Don't cry, honey," I'd say. "Your mom is going to pull through this." But she didn't believe it, and neither did I. Claire died one August morning, just as the sun was streaming through the hospital window. Ashley was 13. The scream she let out still haunts me in my sleep. After that day, nothing was ever the same. Suddenly, the house felt cold, silent. The smell of the fresh-baked bread Claire used to make on Sundays was gone, and so was my daughter's laughter. I tried to be both a father and a mother, but I failed a lot. I didn't know how to talk to her about certain things, how to comfort her when I saw her staring at pictures of her mom. There were days she would lock herself in her room and refuse to eat, and other days when she would just look at me with a mixture of anger and sadness. I think, deep down, she blamed me for not being able to save her. When she turned 16, she started working part-time at a clothing store. She said she wanted to help me out, but I knew she was doing it to escape the emptiness. That's when she started to meet other people, get other ideas, and slowly, I stopped being her refuge. I remember one argument that marked the beginning of the end. "Dad, I don't want you to keep working so hard. You're getting old." "I'm not old, just tired. But someone has to keep this house going." "I don't want to live like this," she said. "I want something more, something different." "And what's different, honey?" "I don't know, but I don't want to end up like you." That sentence hurt more than any physical wound. I don't want to end up like you. From that day on, something between us broke, even if neither of us said it out loud. Still, I tried to be present. I helped her get into college, paid what I could, sold off what was left of the wood shop. She told me it was temporary, that she'd pay me back when she graduated, but the money was never what was important. I just didn't want her to forget where she came from. Over time, she started to have friends I didn't know. She dressed differently, talked differently, and would correct me when I said something old-fashioned. One afternoon, while we were having lunch, she told me she'd met someone. His name is Daniel. He's smart. Works at a big firm. I smiled, even though something inside me felt uneasy. And does he treat you right? I asked. Yeah, Dad. He makes me feel special. Her voice trembled a little, and I knew she was in love. From that moment on, her world revolved around him. Daniel started visiting the house, always polite, always with measured words. But there was something in his eyes I didn't like. It wasn't love I saw, it was calculation. One night, when he went to the bathroom, I saw he'd left his phone on the table. A notification lit up the screen. Don't forget what we talked about. Everything will go as planned. I didn't know what it meant, but something inside me warned me that this man wasn't bringing peace. I tried to talk to Ashley, but she shut me down. Dad, stay out of it. Daniel loves me, and you're just jealous. It's not jealousy, honey. It's concern. You always find something to criticize. Just let me live my life. And so I did. I let her live her life. But in doing so, I died a little bit each day. Years passed, and the love that once filled the house turned into distance. She only came for Christmas, and sometimes not even then. One day, while cleaning the house, I found the old dollhouse I had built for her. It was broken, covered in dust. I picked it up carefully, and one of the walls fell off, revealing a photo tucked inside, her on my shoulders, laughing. I stared at it for minutes, and I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I remembered her recent words. I don't need some washed-up old man. And I understood that a father's love can become his greatest punishment. That night, I pulled out the envelope again, for the priest officiating the wedding of Ashley Baker. I thought about everything I had kept silent about for years, about the secrets Claire took to her grave, about the things I discovered after her death, and I knew the time had come to speak. I wouldn't do it out of spite, but out of justice. Sometimes, the truth doesn't save you, but it sets you free. And I, after a lifetime of silence, needed to be set free. The first time I saw him, I knew that man would bring misfortune. It wasn't because of what he said, but because of what he didn't, because of the way he looked at everyone as if he was calculating their worth. Daniel was young, handsome, with a suit that was too expensive for his age and cologne that filled the room. Ashley introduced him with a smile I hadn't seen on her since she was a little girl. Dad, this is Daniel, she said, and she said it with pride. He shook my hand firmly, too firmly, like someone marking his territory. A pleasure to meet you, Mr. Baker. Ashley has told me so much about you. I hope it was good, I replied. He smiled but didn't answer. That smile left a bitter taste in my mouth. I didn't know then if it was just my own mistrust or a father's intuition, but something in me screamed that this boy was not sincere. During dinner, he talked about his job, his travels, the connections he had. Everything was about luxury, success, goals, and more goals. Ashley looked at him mesmerized, as if his every word was a promise of a future I could never give her. And you, Mr. Baker, what do you do? He asked me in a friendly tone, though his eyes held a curiosity disguised as compassion. I'm a carpenter, I answered calmly. Retired now. Ah, a noble trade, he said, looking down at his own manicured nails, though it must be hard work on the hands. I looked at my own hands, covered in scars, in years, in effort. I hid them under the table. Ashley laughed, not maliciously, but with a note that hurt me more than any word. I knew in that moment I was losing more than just her affection. After that night, Daniel became a regular fixture. He'd come on Sundays, always with some expensive gift. Flowers, perfume, boxes of chocolates. I watched my daughter transform. She stopped wearing the simple clothes she used to love and started dressing how he wanted. It's just style, Dad, she'd tell me. But it wasn't just that. It was as if she was slowly erasing herself to fit into his world. One afternoon, he asked me to go with him to see the plot of land where they planned to build their house. I agreed, though I didn't understand why he wanted my opinion. The place was beautiful, with a view of the hills, but what struck me was how Daniel talked about the future, a future that never included me. Ashley and I will travel a lot. Our children will go to good schools. We'll have a different life. I just listened. I didn't see myself in that life. There was no room for me there. When we got back, while Ashley went to get something, Daniel offered me a cigarette. You know, John, he said in a casual tone, Ashley told me about the hard times you all went through. Yes, life wasn't always easy, I replied. That's why I want to give her a better life, he added. You've done your part. Now let me take care of her. He said it with a calm smile, but every word sounded like an order. He wasn't asking for my permission. He was dismissing me. I couldn't sleep that night. I looked at the old family photos and felt time slipping through my fingers. I thought about Claire, how she used to tell me that when the time came, I had to trust in life and let Ashley follow her own path. But what happens when that path leads her straight to someone who doesn't deserve her love? Months passed, and my daughter got engaged. She told me over the phone with no emotion. Dad, Daniel asked me to marry him. And what did you say? I asked, though I already knew. I said yes. There was an awkward silence. So, when's the wedding? We don't know yet. Daniel wants something big, elegant. Don't worry, I'll let you know. I want you to be with me. I'll let you know. One day, out of curiosity or maybe desperation, I decided to find out more about Daniel. I went to my old shop, where I still knew some guys, men who worked in construction and transport. One of them told me he'd seen him several times at a downtown restaurant, but not with my daughter. He showed me a picture he'd taken on his phone. In it, Daniel was sitting with an older, elegant woman who was not Ashley. Maybe she's a client, I said, trying to convince myself. Didn't look like it, the man replied. They kissed before they left. I felt a hollow pit in my stomach. I put the photo in my pocket and left without another word. That night, I waited for Ashley to come over. When she arrived, I showed her the picture. Who is this woman, honey? Ashley turned pale. Dad, don't start. That woman is a friend of Daniel's. A friend or something more? I don't know, and I don't care. Of course you care, I yelled for the first time. Don't you see who you're marrying? She looked at me with fury. You always want to ruin my happiness, always. I just want to protect you. I don't need your protection. I don't need anything from you. And she left, slamming the door. I was alone again with the photo in my hand. That woman. There was something about her. Her face was disturbingly familiar. It took me hours to place it, but when I did, the air left my lungs. She was the same woman I had seen years ago in an old photograph of my wife, Claire. An old co-worker, she had said back then. But now I understood the truth. I searched through Claire's old things. In a drawer, I found letters, photos, memories. And there it was. A love letter signed by someone with the same initial as Daniel. I didn't want to believe it, but the last name matched. Daniel wasn't just engaged to my daughter. He was the son of the man my wife had betrayed me with. I sat there, frozen in shock, as all the pieces fell into place. Life, in its cruel irony, was bringing me back to the exact point where my misfortune began. My daughter was going to marry the son of her mother's lover. I cried that night. Not for me, but for her, because she had no idea of the history she was about to repeat, and I understood that if I didn't do something, the cycle would continue. I took the envelope I had prepared for the priest and left it on the table. It was still empty, but I knew now what I had to write. The truth. The whole truth. And this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. The day before the wedding dawned strangely. There was no wind, no birds singing, no neighborhood dogs barking. Everything seemed suspended, as if the world was holding its breath. I woke up before dawn. I hadn't slept at all. The candle I had lit the night before had burned all the way down, leaving a dry line of wax on the desk. On the table rested the white envelope with my steady handwriting, for the priest officiating the wedding of Ashley Baker. Inside, there was still nothing, but in my head, the letter had already been written for years, even if I didn't know it. I made some coffee and sat by the window. The neighborhood was slowly waking up. I watched the neighbors sweeping their porches, kids with colorful backpacks running for the school bus, the mailman making his rounds. Everything was the same, except me. I felt that this day would mark the end of something, maybe my pain or maybe my entire life as a father. Around mid-morning, Ashley called. She hadn't called in weeks. Dad, she said, her voice flat, I'm letting you know the wedding is tomorrow. I don't want any trouble. Don't come. I stayed silent for a few seconds before answering. Don't worry, honey. I'm not planning on interrupting anything." "Good. I'm glad to hear it. I just wanted to wish you happiness." "I will be," she replied with a certainty that hurt. "Daniel loves me." I wanted to tell her so many things, but I said nothing. When she hung up, the silence was so thick I had to take a deep breath to keep from crying. Life had taught me that love isn't shown with sweet words, but with actions. And my action, though she wouldn't understand it, would be the hardest one of all. In the afternoon, I went for a walk. I passed by the church where she would be married. The preparations were underway. White flowers, gold ribbons, musicians tuning their instruments. I saw Daniel walk in, talking to the priest, and I had to step back so he wouldn't see me. He was laughing, self-assured. He looked like a happy man, but behind that smile was a shadow that only I recognized. I remembered when I found the old letter among Claire's things. The words were still burned into my mind. "Our relationship can't continue. My husband suspects. Take care of your son. Promise me he won't repeat my mistakes." Signed with a D. And now, that son, Daniel, was about to marry the daughter of the man his father had betrayed, an irony so cruel only life itself could write it. I went back home and opened the drawer where I kept the old photos. I took out one of Claire, smiling, holding Ashley as a baby. "Look what we made, Claire," I whispered. "We raised her with love, and still the world has corrupted her." I felt rage, but also compassion, not for Daniel or his father, but for my daughter. She was an innocent in the middle of a story she never asked to inherit. I lit another candle. The smoke rose in a spiral, as if it wanted to carry my thoughts to a place where there is no guilt. I picked up the pen and began to write. "Father, I beg you to read this before you continue the ceremony. This isn't about ruining a wedding, but about preventing a greater tragedy. My name is John Baker, father of the bride, and although I was not invited, I cannot remain silent. What you are about to join at this altar is not a blessed marriage, but the echo of an old sin repeating itself. The man my daughter is about to marry is the son of the man who destroyed my home, the son of my late wife's lover. This is not the fault of the young people, but of the silence of their elders. But the truth must be spoken, because love cannot be built on a lie." My hands were shaking as I wrote. Every word felt like a brick on my chest. I felt that with this letter, I was sealing my own fate. I didn't know how Ashley would react, but at least when the priest read it, she would know who her father was, and above all, who she really was. I finished the letter as night fell. I folded it carefully, put it in the envelope, and sealed it with a drop of melted wax. I looked at it for a long time before putting it in my pocket. It wasn't revenge. It was a farewell. I walked to the church when no one was left. The altar lights lit the interior with a deceptive peace. I went in quietly and approached the confessional. The priest, an older man with a kind face, recognized me. "John, what brings you here?" "Father, I need to ask you a favor." I handed him the envelope. "Tomorrow, during the ceremony, when it's time for the vows, read this, please." He looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure?" "More than ever." "What does this letter contain?" "The truth. That's all, Father. The truth is the only gift that can save a soul." The priest nodded slowly. "If you believe it is just, then I will do it." I thanked him. I left, and as I closed the door, I felt something inside me break free. I couldn't eat dinner that night. I just stared at Claire's portrait on the mantel. "Tomorrow it will all be over," I told her, "not with hatred, but with justice." And although my heart ached for the first time in years, I felt peace. I went to bed late with the feeling of having already lived an entire life. As sleep finally took me, I imagined Ashley in her white dress, smiling, walking toward the altar, never suspecting what she was about to hear. I didn't know if she would hate me or one day understand. But one thing was certain. After tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. As the candle burned out, the last thought that crossed my mind was a prayer. God, don't let this truth destroy her, but don't let her live in a lie. And with that, I closed my eyes, knowing that the next dawn would bring the most painful and necessary day of my life. I wrote that letter with a trembling hand, but a steady heart. Every word was a wound opening and a scar closing at the same time. I had to say it all, even if it hurt me, because silence, that old enemy that had been my companion for so many years, could no longer rule my life. I put it on the table, turned on the lamp, and took a deep breath. The paper was blank, waiting for me like a postponed confession. I picked up the pen, and the first thing I wrote was her name. Ashley, my daughter. If you are hearing this, it's because I no longer have the strength to stay silent. I'm not writing this out of spite, but from the deepest love a father can feel, a love that has been misunderstood, despised, and yet, somehow, is still alive. I paused, a knot in my throat. For a second, I thought about tearing up the paper, letting time bury the truth. But something inside me, maybe Claire's voice, maybe my own, forced me to continue. I want to tell you something your mother was never able to. When you were just 4 years old, her illness had already weakened her. But before she got sick, before life stole our peace, she made a mistake that destroyed me, but one I chose to forgive for my love for you. She fell in love with another man, someone who promised to help her with a business, but all he did was take advantage of her vulnerability. That man's name was Daniel Shaw. And today, the man you are about to marry is his son. Tears blurred my vision. Remembering that name was like reliving my wife's death a second time. I kept writing, determined to leave nothing in the shadows. I'm not telling you this so you can hate, but so you can understand. Sometimes, fate has cruel ways of showing us what we refuse to see. Daniel, your fiancé, doesn't know who I really am or what his father did, but his family knows. And I have seen in that boy's eyes the same ambition I saw in his father's when he took from me what I loved most. Don't marry him, daughter. Don't repeat your mother's history. I got up and walked to the window. The night was still, windless. The reflection of the candle on the glass looked like a living flame, reminding me I was still breathing. I took a sip of cold coffee and went on. I made mistakes too, Ashley. I was a man too proud to ask for help when I needed it, too silent to show you my feelings. When your mother died, I dedicated myself to surviving, not living. And that was my greatest sin against you, raising you with love but without tenderness. I didn't know how to show you how much I needed you. So when you turned your back on me, I didn't blame you. It just hurt me that the love I gave you wasn't enough to protect you. As I wrote, I felt a release. Every word was a confession before God and my own conscience. The paper was filling up with my entire life, the silences, the regrets, everything I had held back while time stole my loved ones. Don't think I want to ruin your wedding. The only thing I want is for you to live in truth, even if it hurts. Because a love born from deceit doesn't blossom, it only withers. And if you allow this marriage to happen today, you will be tying your destiny to the shadow of the man who destroyed ours. Don't let it happen, daughter. Not because I say so, but because you deserve to be free from the mistakes of others. I stared at those lines for a long time. Tears fell onto the paper, and the ink spots looked like open wounds. I thought about Claire in her last days when she took my hand and whispered, "Take care of our daughter, John. Don't judge her. Just protect her." And that's what I was doing. In a way she might not understand now, but one day she would. If I'm no longer here when you read this, I want you to remember something. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means not letting the past steal your peace. I forgave your mother, even though it broke me. And I forgive you too for the words you said to me. Because I know you didn't say them from your heart, but from the pain of not knowing who you really are. Everything I did for love. The clock struck 3 in the morning. I closed my eyes and listened to the sounds of the night, the crickets, the wind in the trees, the distant murmur of the city. And in the midst of it all, the silence that only accompanies those who are about to lose everything or gain it all. When the priest reads this letter, it will be too late to stop the words, but maybe not too late to stop fate. If you hate me after this, I will accept it. I prefer your hatred born from the truth to your love based on a lie. Because a love built on a lie, daughter, is doomed to collapse. I set the pen down, took a deep breath, and reread it all, from beginning to end. It was a mix of a last will and a farewell, a plea and a redemption. There was no beauty in those lines, but there was truth. And the truth, however painful, is always an act of love. I folded the paper carefully, slid it into the envelope, and sealed it. On the front I wrote, "To be read before the vows." I blew out the candle. The smoke rose in a spiral like a soul set free. For the first time in many years, I felt peace. I didn't know if I would live to see the consequences of that letter, but I was sure of one thing. My voice would be present at the most important moment of her life. And even if she didn't know it yet, that would be the last gift her father would ever give her. I had never felt so cold on such a sunny day. The sky was clear, the air smelled of fresh flowers and incense, and yet, inside me, it was all winter. I arrived early, long before the wedding was set to begin, not to go in, but to watch from a distance. I sat on a park bench across from St. Michael's Church, the same one where we had Ashley baptized more than 30 years ago. The irony of life. In the same place where I first held her in my arms, I was now about to watch her walk away forever. The facade was decorated with white and gold garlands. Cars arrived one after another, dropping off women in elegant dresses and men in dark suits. The murmur of the crowd floated on the air, a river of voices that pushed me back into painful memories. I wasn't part of that crowd, and I didn't want to be. I was just watching, invisible. I saw Daniel arrive first. He was wearing a flawless black suit, a pearl gray tie, and that confident smile that always repulsed me. He greeted everyone with the false cordiality of someone who knows how to fake affection. The photographer's cameras captured his every gesture, every look. I watched him from my bench, my fists clenched. I thought about his father, about the damage he caused, about the nights my wife cried over that man. Now, his son was walking to the altar with the same arrogance. It was like seeing the past reincarnated. Minutes later, she arrived. My daughter, Ashley, dressed in white with a veil covering her face and flowers in her hair. She looked beautiful, yes, but her beauty hurt me, because behind that smile was a lie, a story she didn't yet know and that was about to destroy her. My heart was pounding. For a moment, I wanted to run, to scream at her, to hug her and say, "Don't do it, honey. Not with this man, not with this history." But I didn't. I stayed perfectly still. I knew it was no longer my place to speak. When the bells began to ring, I knew the time had come. The guests filed in one by one, the choir began its melodies, and the church doors closed. I stayed outside, watching through the stained glass windows, the same windows I had helped clean so many times when I was a young man helping Father Michael. The light coming through the glass painted the floor in shades of red and blue, as if the church itself was bleeding. The minutes passed. The ceremony began. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw the movements, the gestures, the faces. Ashley walked toward the altar, on the arm of an uncle, I suppose, who was taking my place. Daniel waited for her with a wide, confident, proud smile, as if the whole world belonged to him. When they met, they took each other's hands. And in that instant, the priest, the same one I had given my letter to the night before, looked up. I could see a slight tremor in his face, a doubt he couldn't quite hide. He pulled something out from under the missal. It was the white envelope. My envelope. My heart hammered against my chest. I knew he was going to do it. He was going to keep his word. "Before we continue with the vows," the priest said, his deep voice carrying even outside, "I must read something that the father of the bride has left for this moment." A murmur spread through the church. I saw Ashley turn her head, confused. Daniel frowned. The priest broke the seal and unfolded the letter. The echo of his words hit the stone walls like a judgment. I couldn't hear every single word, but I saw the reactions. First, surprise, then disbelief, and then fear. Ashley brought her hands to her chest. Daniel turned pale. The crowd began to whisper. The priest kept reading without stopping, as if every sentence was an arrow shot from the heavens. The flowers seemed to tremble in the breeze coming through the open windows. I clung to the back of the bench, trying to hold back my own tears. And then I heard her broken voice. No, it can't be," she said, taking a step back. I saw Daniel let go of her hand. The silence inside the church became so thick that even the candles seemed to flicker. The priest lowered the letter, his face full of compassion. Ashley fell to her knees in front of the altar, covering her face with her hands. The white veil slid to the floor, and her sobbing filled the entire church. Daniel tried to approach her, but she pushed him away. "Is it true?" she screamed. "Tell me it's not true." He didn't answer. He just stared at her, unable to fake it any longer. The truth was out, and there was no going back. From outside, I closed my eyes. There was no joy in my victory, only a deep, profound pain. Because even though I knew I had done the right thing, seeing her destroyed was like dying all over again. When the people started to leave, I hid behind a tree. Some were talking in low voices, others were staring at the ground. What a disgrace. That poor girl. How could this happen? They said. The wedding had become a public trial, and I, her father, was the silent judge of her destiny. I saw Daniel come out, pale, his face a wreck. He got into his car without looking back. Then she came out. My daughter. No veil, no flowers, no smile. Just red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands. She stopped for a few seconds in the doorway, looking up at the sky, and I would swear that for just an instant, our eyes met. I don't know if she really saw me or if I imagined it, but in that brief look, I knew she understood. She knew it had been me. I didn't move. I didn't call out to her. There was nothing left to say. The truth had already said it all. I waited until everyone was gone. I walked into the empty church, where the fallen flowers and messy pews were witnesses to the disaster. At the altar, the priest was still holding the letter. I approached him. He looked at me in silence and nodded. "Sometimes the truth arrives like a storm," he said, "but after it passes, the earth can breathe again." I didn't answer. I just looked at the cross. In that moment, I didn't feel pride or remorse, only exhaustion, the exhaustion of a man who gave everything for love and lost everything by telling the truth. I left the church, walking slowly, the sun on my back. And as I walked away, I felt that, for the first time in many years, the weight I had been carrying on my shoulders was starting to disappear. The silence inside the church was so deep, you could hear the crackle of the melting candles. The priest, his hands trembling, held my letter. His calm but heavy voice began to read. From the half-open door, I watched, my soul suspended. Every word that left his mouth was an open wound in my daughter's heart, and in mine, too. My daughter, if these words are being read, it is because I can no longer stay silent. Silence, while it may seem kind, can also be a form of betrayal. And to stay silent about what is about to be repeated would be to condemn you to a lie you do not deserve. The murmuring of the crowd died down. No one breathed. Ashley looked at him confused, unable to understand. Daniel pressed his lips together, crossed his arms, and pretended to be indifferent, but his leg was shaking. "My name is John Baker. I'm the father of the bride, even if my daughter has decided that title no longer belongs to me. But a father is still a father, even when he is rejected. That is why I am writing this letter, not to stop a wedding, but to save a soul." The priest paused, his eyes finding Ashley. She was already starting to cry, her hands clenched in her lap. "Ashley, the man you are about to marry carries a name that marked the ruin of our family. Shaw. His father, Daniel Shaw Sr., was your mother's, Claire's, lover. I only found out years later, when it was too late to save the marriage and too late to save us. I didn't seek him out. I didn't confront him, because I chose to protect you instead. But today, seeing his son about to join his life with yours, I know that silence is no longer an act of love, but of cowardice." A choked cry escaped my daughter's lips. "No, it can't be," she whispered. The groom tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. The priest continued reading, his voice grave and firm, like someone carrying out a sacred duty. "Fate is cruel sometimes. It confronts us with the sins of our parents, with the shadows we thought were buried. But you, daughter, you can still choose. You are not condemned to repeat your mother's history. Do not join yourself to someone who carries in his blood the same deceit that destroyed our home." The women in the pews covered their mouths. Some of the men muttered under their breath. The groom, red with anger, stood up from his seat. "This is a lie," he shouted. "It's a farce." The priest looked at him calmly. "Young man, I must ask for respect. Let me finish." I could see from the doorway how Daniel was shaking. His face no longer held confidence, but fear. The fear of someone who knows the truth has finally caught up to him. Your mother wasn't a bad woman, Ashley. She was just weak. And that man, his father, took advantage of that weakness. I'm telling you this not to judge, but so you understand that there are wounds that cut across generations. If you get married today, not knowing, you will be tying your destiny to the same root that poisoned ours. Ashley covered her face, her sobbing filling the church. The musicians stopped playing. The flowers on the altar seemed to wilt under the weight of that truth. Daughter, I have failed too. I didn't know how to be a man of sweet words. I hid in my work, in my sadness, in my loneliness, but I never, ever stopped loving you. That's why, even though these words hurt you, they are my last act of love. I would rather you hate me for telling you the truth than love me while living a lie. The priest's voice broke for an instant. Some of the guests began to stand up, the murmuring growing like a wave crashing through the air. Ashley tried to speak, but no words came out. Her veil, fallen to the floor, was mixed with the tears dripping onto the marble. Love, daughter, isn't proven with promises at an altar. It's proven by the truth one is willing to face. And the truth is this: Daniel doesn't love you for who you are, but for what you represent. He sees you as a way to clean a family name, to redeem a history. Don't give him that power. Don't give your life to someone who carries the poison of ambition in his blood. Daniel advanced toward the priest. Enough! Stop reading, he yelled. But Father Michael raised a hand and stopped him. This church is a house of truth. Lies have no place here. From the door, I felt a tremor run through me. Every word was a blow that struck me too. I had loved Claire, and even though I had forgiven her, I never forgot her betrayal. Now, the echo of that past was returning to close the circle. Ashley, if after hearing this, you still decide to go through with it, I will accept it. But if you choose to stop, I will know that you learned what I tried to teach you your whole life. That dignity is worth more than any altar. I love you, daughter. Your father, John Baker. The priest folded the letter. The silence was absolute. No one moved, until Daniel, his face a mask of defeat, looked at her and said, loud enough for all to hear, "It's true, Ashley. Your father is telling the truth." She stared at him, her eyes wide with tears, and seeing that he didn't deny it, she collapsed to her knees. The bouquet slipped from her hands. The sound of it hitting the floor was the final note of the ceremony. I couldn't hold back anymore. I took a step back, out of the church, and leaned against the wall. The tears burned my eyes. It wasn't joy or relief. It was pure, profound sadness. Because even though I had told the truth, that truth had cost me my soul. As I walked away, I heard my daughter's sobs behind me. I didn't look back. I had already done what I had to do. The afternoon wind blew through the trees, carrying with it the echo of the words that had just changed everything. And deep down, I felt that Claire, wherever she was, had heard it too. For the first time, the silence didn't hurt. It was peace. Painful, yes, but peace at last. The sound of the bouquet hitting the floor was the last echo of what was once a dream. The entire church was paralyzed. Ashley was on her knees, her white dress spread around her like a broken shroud. The priest had left the letter on the altar, and the guests were murmuring in whispers that became knives. What a disgrace! How can it be true? That poor girl. From the entrance, I heard every one of them, and every word hurt as if it was piercing my own chest. Daniel took a step back. He was no longer the elegant, confident man who had walked through the main doors. Now he looked like a ghost, his face pale, his hands shaking. Ashley looked up at him, uncomprehending, waiting for him to say something, anything, to deny what she had just heard. But Daniel just stayed silent until, in a hollow voice, he spoke the words that finished destroying her. I had no idea, but if that's true, this can't continue. She jumped to her feet, frantic, searching his eyes. What are you saying? Tell me you're not just going to leave me like this. He didn't answer. He just adjusted his jacket, looked at the guests, and walked toward the door. He didn't even turn to look at her. He left her alone at the altar, in front of everyone. The murmuring turned into an uproar. Some women started to get up. The musicians lowered their instruments. The priest closed his eyes and sighed. Ashley, however, just stood there, staring at the door where the man she loved had just walked out. And suddenly, her body shuddered. The tears she had been holding back erupted in a wail that chilled my soul. She fell to her knees again, but this time, not to pray. She fell because she could no longer stand. I took a step forward, not knowing if I should or not. Part of me wanted to run to her, to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. Another part, the part that had suffered years of silence, told me it wasn't my moment. But when I saw her there, alone, fragile, broken, I understood that no amount of pride is worth more than a father's love. I walked in. At first, nobody noticed me. People were too busy watching the disaster unfold. I walked slowly down the center aisle, each step echoing like a drum in my chest. Some people started to realize. The murmurs died down. When I reached the altar, Ashley looked up. Her eyes went wide. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely a thread of air. I knelt in front of her, slowly, to be at her level. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other. In her eyes, there was pain, confusion, and a guilt that made her tremble. In mine, there was exhaustion, but also compassion. "Why did you do it?" she finally asked, her voice choked with a sob. "Why did you do this to me?" I took a deep breath. "Because I would rather you hate the truth than live in a lie, daughter." "But you took everything from me," she cried. "My wedding, my happiness." "That wasn't happiness, Ashley. It was a wound repeating itself." She shook her head, weeping. "No, you don't know. I loved him. And he wasn't who you thought he was." "And you are?" she shot back with rage. "Are you who I thought you were?" Her words cut through me. I didn't answer. I just looked at her and said quietly, "I'm the same man who carried you on his shoulders when you were 5, when you said I was your hero. I'm the same man who worked day and night so you would never want for anything. The same man who cried alone when you called me a failure. And the same man who, even after all of that, would still give his life for you." Her lips trembled. The makeup ran down her face, washing away any trace of the elegant woman who had walked into that church. Now it was just my daughter, my little girl, broken, human, with no masks. The priest came over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Daughter, sometimes God doesn't destroy lives. He destroys lies," he said gently. She looked at him, not knowing what to say. We left the church together, in silence. The guests watched us with a mixture of pity and curiosity. I draped my jacket over her shoulders. The wind was blowing hard, lifting petals from the ground as if the sky itself wanted to sweep away the pain. Ashley walked slowly, barefoot, having lost her shoes somewhere in the chaos. We got to the small park across from the church. We sat on the same bench where I had waited that morning. She didn't speak. She just stared at the ground until she finally murmured, I hurt you a lot, didn't I?" "Yes," I answered honestly. "But not more than you hurt yourself by forgetting who you were." She looked up, her eyes swollen. "And do you hate me?" I shook my head. "A father doesn't hate, Ashley. He just suffers in silence." There was a long pause. The church bells rang again, but they weren't announcing a wedding. They were announcing the end of something. She rested her head on my shoulder, just like when she was a little girl. "I don't know how I'm going to face people after this," she said through her tears. "Start by facing yourself," I replied, "without lies, without fear." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in a soft red. I felt the weight of the years on my shoulders, but also something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Maybe I had destroyed a wedding, yes, but I had also saved a soul, maybe hers, maybe mine. Ashley took a deep breath. "Dad," she whispered, "forgive me." I took her hand. "You already are, honey," I said, just by saying it. We stayed like that, in silence, as the afternoon slowly faded. The white dress, now dirty and torn, fluttered in the wind like a surrendered flag. And in that moment, I understood that sometimes life can only be rebuilt from the rubble. When we got back to the house, I helped her inside. In the hallway, the old photos were still hanging. She stopped in front of one, her mother, Claire, smiling. "Do you think she sees me?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, "and I think she's crying, just like us. But not from sadness, from relief." Ashley closed her eyes, a tear falling onto the picture frame. "I don't know if I can forgive myself," she murmured. "Forgiveness isn't asked for all at once, daughter," I said softly. "It's built, day by day." And then she began to cry, the deepest, most liberating cry. I held her, and for the first time in many, many years, I felt like I had my daughter back. Not the perfect girl, not the proud woman, but the real one. And in that embrace, the past finally began to let go. They say the past never really dies. It just hides, waiting for the exact moment to breathe down your neck again. I learned that truth the hard way, because what happened with my wife, Claire, was a shadow that stayed with me my whole life, silent, cruel, and as real as the guilt I carried for not having done anything. I met Claire when we were both young. She had a smile that could disarm anyone. She worked in a small clothing store and dreamed of opening her own shop one day. I was a carpenter, with no fortune, but with a heart ready to build her the world if she needed it. We got married with nothing, but we were happy. And for a while, that happiness was enough. Until the debts, my father's illness, and just need began to chip away at what we had. Claire started working more hours at the store, and I, out of pride, never asked her for help. I said I could handle everything, but the money wasn't enough. I'd work until dawn, and when I got home, she'd sometimes already be asleep. The silences started, the arguments over small things, the distance, and in the middle of that distance, he appeared. Daniel Shaw, an elegant man with a pressed suit, polished shoes, and sweet words. He owned the store where Claire worked. He had a reputation as a gentleman, a good boss, a successful man. I met him one afternoon when I stopped by to pick up Claire. She introduced us with a nervous smile. "My boss, Mr. Shaw," she said, avoiding my eyes. He extended his hand and smiled with that practiced kindness I would later recognize in his son. "A pleasure, John. You have an exceptional wife." I don't know why, but those words chilled me. The following months were a blur. Claire started coming home later. She said it was inventory, meetings, special orders, and I, like a fool, believed her. Until one night, coming home from the shop, I found an envelope slipped under the door. No return address, just one sentence written in blue ink. "Open your eyes before it's too late." Inside was a photo. Claire and Shaw. At a cafe downtown, holding hands, my world stopped. The air in my lungs felt heavy. Rage rose in my throat, but it didn't come out. I just sat in the dining room chair and stared at that photo until the sun came up. The next morning, I didn't confront her. Not because I lacked the courage, but because something inside me knew that if I did, there would be no going back. She came in, kissed my forehead, and went on as if nothing had happened. And I pretended I didn't know. Weeks later, I noticed she was different, distant, melancholy. One night, as we were eating dinner, she said without looking at me, "John, do you think love just ends?" "No," I replied, my voice dry. "Love doesn't end, it just hides." She looked down and said nothing else. Soon after, she got sick. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion, but the doctors were clear. A serious heart problem. There was no money for expensive treatments. I went to see Shaw. Yes, I had the nerve to do it. I asked him for help. He listened to me with that fake smile and gave me a modest sum, like someone tossing crumbs to a beggar. "For Claire," he said, in that smooth voice that turned my stomach. I didn't hit him. I didn't yell. I just took the money because she needed it. But I swore it would be the last time that man would buy my dignity. From then on, I dedicated myself completely to taking care of her. The illness consumed her quickly. And one afternoon, while she was in the hospital, a letter arrived for her. The envelope was marked with the initials DS. The nurse handed it to me, not knowing. I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. "Claire, I can't keep seeing you suffer like this. Forgive me for everything. I swear I will take care of our son, and I will never let him repeat my mistakes." I froze. Our son. That phrase hit me like a hammer, but I didn't fully understand what it meant until years later when I heard the name Shaw again. Because that son was Daniel. The same one who, decades later, crossed paths with Ashley, the son of the man who destroyed my marriage, now in love with the daughter of the man his father betrayed. Life, closing its circle with a cruelty that seemed written by fate itself. I never told Claire anything, not even when I saw her crying at night, knowing that the guilt was killing her faster than the disease. A day before she died, she took my hand and whispered, "John, promise me you won't leave her alone." "I promise," I said, "and promise me," her voice broke, "that you'll never make her carry my mistakes." I nodded, and I kept that promise until life decided to test my silence. I kept the letter, the photo, and all the memories in a wooden box. That box stayed with me for years, hidden in the closet, like a small tomb where I buried the truth, until the day my daughter introduced me to her fiancé. His name is Daniel Shaw. When I heard that name, I felt the floor open up beneath me. From then on, every gesture, every word, every smile from him reminded me of the father, and I understood that even as the years pass, blood doesn't change its color. It was the same pride, the same coldness, the same calculating gaze. The son of the man who stole my wife, now about to steal my daughter. It was too much to keep silent any longer. That's why I wrote the letter, not to get revenge on Claire or her lover or even fate, but to break the cycle. Because sometimes true love isn't about protecting, it's about stopping, and I needed to stop this story before it repeated itself with a new name and the same tears. Now, as I write this, I understand something I didn't see before. It wasn't Claire's sin that destroyed us. It was my silence, for staying quiet, for being afraid, for protecting what was already broken. Love that doesn't speak the truth rots from the inside, and my whole life was a testament to that slow, silent decay. I look back and wonder if she would have wanted me to reveal everything. Maybe not. But I know that, in a way, she would understand me. Because in the end, the truth was the only thing that united us two. She carried it in her guilt, and I carried it in my pain. And now, watching my daughter face the weight of that same truth, I know the past has finally found its rest. The morning after the failed wedding dawned gray, as if the sky itself was ashamed of what had happened. I hadn't slept. I spent the night sitting by the window, watching the streetlights go out one by one as my mind replayed every word of the letter that had changed our lives. On the table, there were still dregs of coffee I couldn't finish, and on top of it, the photo of Claire and Ashley, back when they were happy. Nothing in that image from the past could have predicted the disaster that was to come. There was a knock on the door around noon. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Ashley. Her face was gaunt, her eyes swollen from crying, her hair pulled back in a hurry. She wore no makeup, none of the shine of the confident woman I had seen just days before. Now, she was just my daughter, my little girl, stripped of her pride, looking for answers. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice hoarse. I nodded and let her in. She sat across from me, in the same chair where she'd eaten breakfast so many times as a child. A few seconds of silence passed before she spoke. "I saw Daniel last night." I didn't respond. "He came to my friend's house. He wanted to explain." She continued. "He said he didn't know anything about what you wrote, that his father died years ago and he never heard that story." Her eyes searched mine desperately, hoping I would contradict her, give her something to hold on to. "And you believed him?" I asked. She hesitated. "I don't know, but part of me wants to." "Of course," I said bitterly. "That's what you've always wanted. To believe anyone but me." She looked down, biting her lip. "Don't say that. You have no idea what I'm feeling." "Yes, Ashley, I do." I leaned forward. "I know exactly what it feels like when the person you love betrays you." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You," she murmured. I nodded. "Your mother did the same thing to me. That's how I knew. That's how I saw it coming." Ashley put her face in her hands. "I can't believe any of this is real," she whispered. "It is real, honey. It always was. The truth just decided to show itself now." There was another knock on the door. Ashley and I looked at each other. "That must be him," she said, standing up. I opened the door. Daniel was there. He looked haggard, disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. The elegant air was gone. He had a folder in his hand and a plea on his face. I need to talk to you, Mr. Baker. We have nothing to talk about, I replied. Please, Ashley intervened. Just listen to him. I let him in. His presence filled the house with an uncomfortable silence. Daniel placed the folder on the table. I didn't come here to argue or to deny what happened between my father and your wife, he said in a low voice. I found out last night. My hands gripped the arms of my chair. And what do you want me to do with that? I asked. Forgive you? No, sir, just to understand that I'm not him. His voice trembled. I didn't choose my last name or my father's sins. Ashley watched him, her tears held back. I stayed silent for a few seconds. Your father destroyed my family, I said finally. And mine destroyed his too, Daniel replied. His words caught me off guard. What did you say? He opened the folder and pulled out a yellowed letter. I found this among his things years ago. I never understood what it meant until yesterday. I took the paper with trembling hands. It was Claire's handwriting. Daniel, don't come near my house anymore. I don't want to keep living with this guilt. Take care of your son, and may he never know what we did. Promise me you won't let him repeat our history. The letters blurred in front of my eyes. I felt dizzy, as if the floor was moving. Daniel's voice was quiet. He promised me he would never get close to your family, that he would move far away. But he died without keeping that promise. And now I understand why fate pushed me toward Ashley. It wasn't a coincidence. It was an old debt looking for redemption. Ashley put a hand to her chest. So, you didn't know anything? Nothing, he replied. But if this destroyed you, I can't be a part of your life. He looked me straight in the eye. I swear to you, Mr. Baker, I loved your daughter without any lies, and if I have to disappear for her to find peace, I will. He put the letter away and turned around. Ashley tried to stop him. Wait, she cried, but he didn't stop. He walked out and closed the door with a quiet click that sounded like a full stop. The silence filled the house again. Ashley was crying, sitting in the same chair where Claire used to sew. I remained standing, staring at the door Daniel had just walked through. For an instant, I felt compassion for him. He was innocent of the sin he inherited, and yet he had paid for it. Just like all of us, I walked over to my daughter and put a hand on her shoulder. Do you love him? I asked. She nodded without looking up. Then don't hate him, I said gently. But don't follow him either. Why? Because some wounds need solitude to heal. And this, I said, putting my hand on my chest, is one of them. Ashley looked at me, her eyes full of tears. Dad, everything hurts. Pain is just the truth, purifying us, I replied. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since this all began, I felt that this embrace wasn't about guilt, but about comfort. That night, after she fell asleep, I went out to the backyard. The air smelled like damp earth, and the stars were barely visible behind the clouds. I thought about Claire, about Daniel Sr., about the son who inherited his name, and about how time doesn't forgive. But sometimes it offers the chance to close the cycles with truth. I pulled the old wooden box from the closet. Inside were the photos, the letters, the mementos of a life marked by secrets. I lit a candle and without thinking twice, I burned them, one by one. The fire lit up my hands. The smoke rose slowly, like a soul finally finding rest. When the last piece of paper turned to ash, I felt a relief I hadn't known. It wasn't happiness, but it was peace. The story had been told, in full. There was nothing left to hide, not for love and not for fear. Tomorrow, I thought, everything would begin again, not with the same people or the same mistakes, but with the certainty that sometimes the truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to redemption. There are silences that heal more than 1,000 words, and that dawn was one of them. I woke up to the soft light filtering through the curtains. Ashley was still asleep on the sofa, wrapped in an old blanket. Her face, swollen from crying, reminded me of when she was a little girl, the same expression of exhaustion and tenderness. For an instant, I imagined that time had stopped, that none of this was real, and that I could still make her hot chocolate before she left for school. But reality returned to my mind like a cold sigh. The smell of coffee filled the house. I put 2 mugs on the table, even though I knew she wouldn't drink much. When she woke up, she looked at me in silence. She didn't say good morning. She just sat across from me and held the mug in her hands. "I barely slept," she whispered. "Me neither," I replied. For a moment, the only sound was our spoons clinking against the porcelain, until, with a trembling voice, she said, "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about everything." I looked down, waiting for what would come next. "I can't justify what you did, but I think I'm starting to understand you." I looked up. Her eyes weren't those of the haughty woman who had despised me days before. There was something new in them: humility, exhaustion, truth. "My whole life I thought you were a weak man," she continued, "that you hid behind your silence. But now I see you were quiet to protect me, even when it was destroying you." I managed a small smile. "It wasn't always bravery," I said. "Sometimes being quiet was also a form of fear." She took my hand. The gesture disarmed me. "Dad, forgive me. For the things I said to you, for calling you a failure, for making you feel like you were worthless." "You don't have to ask for my forgiveness," I replied. "Children aren't born knowing how to love their parents. They learn over time." "But I hurt you. And I hurt you." We sat in silence, looking at each other. There was something different in the air. The weight of the years was becoming lighter, as if forgiveness was beginning to weave its blanket between us. After breakfast, we went for a walk. The neighborhood seemed different. The quiet streets, the trees moving in a warm breeze, the neighbors waving, not knowing they were seeing two people rebuilding themselves. We walked aimlessly until we reached the small park where I used to take her to play as a child. The benches were worn, and the rusty swing set still creaked in the wind. Ashley sat on the bench. "You know what I remembered last night?" she said, looking at the sky. "What's that?" "When Mom died. I was so angry with you. I thought you had let her die." "I know," I answered quietly. "And I think that anger never really went away. It grew up with me. That's why I always judged you, even when I didn't understand why." Her words pierced me, but they were necessary. "Sometimes pain looks for someone to blame, honey," I said. "It's the soul's way of not feeling lost." "And you? Who did you blame all this time?" I sighed. "Myself." She fell silent, watching the trees. "Maybe Mom wanted to ask for your forgiveness too," she murmured, "but she ran out of time." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe her way of doing it was leaving you with me, so that through you I could finally understand her." She smiled, a small, sad smile. "I guess that's love, isn't it? Understanding even the things that hurt us." I nodded. "Exactly. We spent hours talking, remembering. We even laughed. For a few moments everything seemed simpler, as if life was giving us a truce, until she looked at me and said something I didn't expect. "I'm going to go see him." "Daniel?" I asked. She nodded. "Not to get back together, but to close the circle. I want to look at him and tell him I forgive him." "That will be good for you," I said. She took a deep breath. "And I also want to start over. I don't know how or where, but I want to." I smiled. "That's called living." On the way back to the house, I stopped at the door and just watched her. For the first time in years, I didn't see her as a confused or ungrateful woman, but as what she always was, my daughter, the flesh and blood of my hopes. And I knew that even though life had broken us, love was piecing us back together with new threads, invisible, but stronger. That afternoon, while she was taking a peaceful nap, I stood looking at Claire's portrait on the mantel. The photo had a small crack in one corner, but her smile was still intact. "We did it, Claire," I whispered, in a clumsy, late way, but we did it. The reflection of the light on the glass seemed like an answer, and for the first time, I felt no resentment toward her, only gratitude for leaving me the chance to fix what we had both damaged. I walked to the window. Outside, the sky was turning orange. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the letter, the ruined wedding, the tears. And yet, in that sunset, I understood that it all had meaning. Pain, when it's faced, transforms. And that day, I knew that mine was beginning to turn into something resembling peace. As night fell, Ashley woke up. "Dad," she called from the doorway, Can I sleep here tonight?" "Of course, honey," I said. She settled into her old room. I turned off the lights and sat beside her in the quiet, just like when she was little and I'd tell her stories to help her fall asleep. She took my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I smiled. "I never did." "I know," she replied, closing her eyes. "I know that now." I stayed there, watching her sleep. Her breathing was calm, as if she was finally resting after a long storm. And I also felt that after so many years, I could close my eyes without fear, because I had lost so much, a wife, a family, an entire life. But that night, in the shadows of a humble house and the echo of forgiveness, I'd gotten back the only thing that truly mattered: my daughter. 3 years have passed since that day in the church. 3 years since my voice, turned into a letter, interrupted a marriage and changed the destinies of everyone present. Sometimes I wake up in the early morning and the silence sounds different, as if time itself has learned to walk more calmly. I don't have the strength I used to. My hands tremble, my eyes get tired easily. But my heart beats steady for the first time in many years. Ashley lives with me. She transformed the house, painted the walls, hung new curtains, planted flowers in the backyard. Sometimes I watch her from my wooden chair, the one I made myself decades ago, as she waters the plants or cooks, and I wonder if Claire, wherever she is watching her too. We don't talk much about what happened anymore, but the truth lives between us like a quiet and kind house guest. We've learned to live with it. On Sundays, Ashley takes me to Mass. We sit in the back row. The priest who read my letter, Father Michael, still preaches there. Every time he sees us, he gives me a small smile, one of those that says, "You did the right thing," without words. And I nod because I no longer carry guilt, only gratitude. One day, Ashley came back from the market with news. "I'm going to be moving out," she said as she put away the groceries. "Where to?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "To a nearby city. I got a job at a school." I stayed silent. She continued, "I want to teach art to kids. I want to do something that means something." I smiled. "I'm happy for you, honey. You were always good with your hands, and with your heart. And you'll be okay here? Alone?" "I've been alone my whole life," I joked, "but this time, it doesn't feel heavy." That night she made dinner. We ate together, remembering simple things, her first drawing, the dog we used to have, the city bus rides to the hospital when Claire was still alive. We laughed, and for a moment, everything was light. When we said goodbye, she hugged me tightly as if she wanted to stay in that moment. "Don't cry, honey," I told her. "Goodbyes only hurt when you haven't learned how to love." "And you taught me," she replied. When she left, the silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was a silence full of meaning, like a prayer that had been answered. As the months passed, my strength began to fade. The body, in its wise language, started to let me know that the road was coming to an end. It doesn't scare me. I've known love, pain, betrayal, and redemption. And if I've learned anything, it's that life isn't measured in years, but in the times you dare to tell the truth, even when it hurts. Ashley comes every weekend. She brings bread, flowers, and hugs. Sometimes she sits and reads to me out loud. Other times she just stays quiet, holding my hand. And in those moments, I feel my soul at rest. Everything that was once chaos is now calm. One afternoon, she asked for permission to open the old wooden box, the one that held the secrets of the past. I nodded, but when she opened it, she only found ashes. "You burned them?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," I replied, "because the past doesn't deserve an altar, daughter. Only a lesson." She looked at me for a long time, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Over time, my health worsened. The doctor said my heart was weak, that I should avoid strong emotions." I smiled. After everything I've lived through, what emotion could possibly scare me now? What the doctors don't know is that some hearts don't die from disease. They die from having loved too much. And mine, tired, was just waiting to rest in peace, knowing it gave everything. One night, as Ashley was quietly reading me a passage from the gospel, I interrupted her. "You know, honey, sometimes I think God doesn't punish or reward. He just teaches." "And what did he teach you?" she asked, smiling sweetly. "That love without truth is a lie, and truth without love is cruelty." She nodded, squeezing my hand. Then you learned the hardest part, Dad. And you did too, I said, closing my eyes. I felt the warmth of her hand on mine, and for the first time in many years, I wasn't afraid, because I understood that my story didn't end with me. It ended in her strength, in her ability to forgive, in her desire to live without hatred. A few days passed. One spring morning, the sun came in with a warm, golden light. I heard the birds singing, and I knew it was time. I wrote a few last words on a piece of paper and left it on the table. Ashley, if you're reading this, I'm already where life becomes silence. Don't cry. I lived more than I deserved and learned more than I dreamed. Promise me you'll keep loving, even when it hurts, and that when you have a child, you'll tell them about me. Not as the man who ruined a wedding, but as the father who loved enough to tell the truth. I left the paper under a coffee mug, my old ritual. I sat in my chair in the workshop, looked out the window, and took a deep breath. The air smelled like flowers, like life. And just like that, without pain, without fear, I faded away. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Because in the end, the truth gave me back what time had taken away. My daughter's love, and the peace of my soul. Days later, Father Michael read my final letter during a small mass. Ashley was there, in a simple white dress with a flower on her chest. When he finished, she stood up, walked to the altar, and left a rose on my photo. And she said, in a firm voice that still echoes in my heart, "My father taught me that the truth can hurt, but it can also save you. Today I understand, and I know he's not gone. He just went home." The wind blew, lifting petals into the air. And there, among the murmur of prayers and the scent of incense, I knew my story had ended where it was supposed to, in forgiveness, in love, and in peace. Sometimes the truth hurts, but it also sets you free. John departed in peace, leaving his daughter a legacy of love, forgiveness, and dignity. Because only those who dare to speak the truth can leave without fear. Let us know in the comments what city you're watching from, like this video, and subscribe to the channel to continue following stories that touch the soul.